What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Second Guessing with Stress, and I'm your host, Garrett Williams, aka Texans commentator. I am super hyped about this one. I mean, y'all already know who this is: the man, the myth, the legend, Seth Payne. Seth, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you working around my schedule, and I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah,
Is how I am.
absolutely. So I've developed a friendship with Sean Pendergast, your co-host on Payne and Pendergast on 610, and he informed me that you go to bed early, and I somewhat go to bed late. So my schedule is I go late at night after I put my kids down. So, but I'm also flexible to do it during the day. So I think it works out, and I'm glad we got it to happen. So
Yeah, I was talking to a doctor a while ago about my sleep habits, and I knew that they weren't great. And I explained to her, like, well, listen, I gotta stay up late for sports, but then I've got a 6 a.m. show I have to do in the morning. And she's like, well, Katie Couric goes to bed at 7 p.m. every night. And I always try to live my life as much as possible like Katie Couric. So I had to get real strict. It's the times that I have to stay up late for sports. I try to just, other than that, I try to be real strict with the bedtime.
that sounds like a sign of maturity. Like you're able to, even if there are sports, to still like realize that you don't have to watch every Astros game, especially on the West Coast, till 12 a.m. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll get there one day. That's so kudos to you on that.
Well, you know what I end up doing a lot too is I wake. But the problem is I have a hard time sleeping in past like 4 a.m. at the latest. So a lot of times I can watch the second half of a Sunday night game a lot more efficiently at 3 or 4 in the morning than I can late at night. So I just kind of, there's like, when there's something that I need to watch, like obviously with the Texans, I have to watch that everything live, but I try to manage it as much as I can.
Well, that's a smart way to do it. So you still get to see it before you have to talk about it. So it's just a matter of just waiting. So it sounds
Yeah.
like you got a good plan on that.
Oh yeah, no, there's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than talking out of your ass any more than you should. So it's really Sean and I try to be pretty open and honest about like, hey, especially when the Astros are on the West Coast, we're not going to lie and say, oh yeah, I was up at 1:30 in the morning. It was a horrendous ending to that first game in the A. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's unrealistic for us fans to expect that of y'all. For you to watch every second of every game and then wake up at the crack of dawn or before dawn, and then, but then I've noticed that too. You are right though. Like y'all are honest. Oh, I caught it and this and that, or
Yeah.
whatever. So, but yeah. So like I mentioned to you pre-show, like kind of what I've done with what I do here, is like with Texans media, these interviews. It's kind of twofold. It's for me to get to know you guys better, and as a result, for everyone else to get to know you guys better. Obviously people know you pretty well, your background, but maybe there's some stuff we don't know or people who haven't heard. But I should say, obviously, on the bottom, your handles at Seth C Payne on X and Instagram, and then it's at Seth Payne Show, I believe, on YouTube. Is that correct?
That sounds right. Yeah, just search Seth Payne. It's me and some comedian that pop up. This kid is much better looking than me. It pisses me off, but yeah.
And then obviously you're on Sports Radio 610 with Payne and Pendergast, which is an awesome show, and we'll get into that. But so my first question will be just if you don't mind, as short of an answer, as long of an answer you want to give, just a background on yourself. Obviously, you played in the NFL, which is awesome for the Jaguars and Texans. So if you want to kind of give a background on your football life prior, and basically, how it geared you to what you were doing now.
Okay, I'm gonna skip over the entire era of Deshaun Watson because that'll take too long to explain. So I grew up in upstate New York. It was Buffalo Bills territory. Had my family on my father's side were all dairy farmers. My dad was intermittently a dairy farmer, so I was on farms a lot growing up. Got drafted. Went to Cornell. Ended up getting drafted out of Cornell as like for the first time. Like I had no idea whether I was going to get drafted or not. We were like Cornell wasn't producing the Ivy League in general wasn't producing pro athletes back then. There hadn't been an Ivy League player drafted in like 10 years. So I just I was lucky I got drafted because I didn't know what the hell I was going to do after college. I didn't, and there's no way I would have gone to college if it hadn't been for football and the opportunity to play. So I ended up got drafted by Jacksonville. Spent 5 years there. Ended up after my last year in Jacksonville, we were just really up against the cap, and we knew that there were a lot of guys that were going to be gone at the end of that year. We'd gone to a couple AFC Championship games and everything, but we were just on the downswing. So I got taken in the expansion draft to Houston. Played 5 years in Houston, had an awesome time there, and it was just a different experience. It was a different experience for me with the Texans than it was with the Jaguars, even though we weren't as good a team. It was just the energy and the environment of being on a brand new team and being a veteran on that team it was a different experience in the NFL than I had as a young player on a team that was, when I got there, it was a really good team when I got there, and then it wasn't so great when I left. And then, played here for 5 years and never thought I would go into media at all. It was just like JJ Watt said the other day. Now, JJ's, I'm not trying to compare myself to JJ Watt, but when you're playing, you just it didn't appeal to me. I didn't like, as I got older, I talked less and less to the media because I didn't like being put in the bind of saying something that was going to hurt the team or doing anything like that. And I was just kind of done with it by the time I was done playing. But for a few years out of football, I had a plan for what I wanted to do. And I had a couple businesses here and there. And I realized, man, I don't really enjoy any of this. And at the same time, John Granato, I think the first time John called me, he was with Payne Pendergast as his co-host. There was something that came up. Do you remember when Tony Dungy accused the Texans of faking injuries and was kind of snarky about it? Granato called me up to ask me about that. And I can remember he texted me. So I'd been out of the league for at least 5 years. I was sitting in my kids' morning program in first or second grade, and I got a text from Granato asking if I wanted to come on with them. So yeah, sure. I came as soon as I got out of the morning program. I got on with him, and he started having me on every week. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And Granato really encouraged me and said I should explore it. That was back in 2012. So I ended up exploring it and going with 6'10" instead of Granato. At the time, I think he was at 1560. He forgave me for it.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, mentor. And it's time for me to leave. And then that's pretty much it in a nutshell, as much as possible.
Yeah, no, that's a great. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but that's awesome. Obviously, I've followed you, and I'm sure some people learned some things there, but there's a lot there. Obviously, Cornell. Did you go there at the same time as Nard Dog?
Oh no, but it's the worst. Because I look enough like Ed Helms that it's the worst. Because he's okay. So Nard Dog is the worst version of a person that does actually exist, like that guy. And that's why I hate even bringing up. I was like this long before The Office ever came up. I hate it when anybody talks about where they went to school like it's something that you're supposed to be impressed by. So I tried to, and especially in the NFL, it was a mark against you, especially when I came out. Every coach I talked to, every scout I talked to, they kind of came at it as like, I don't know if this guy's tough enough, or I don't know if I don't know. You might care about school too much. And I'd be like, motherfucker, I got a 0.3 last semester. You think I got a lot of options? I'm not going to medical school next year. Before my senior year, I was on academic probation because I'd been led astray spring of my junior year. Some weird stuff happened, and I wasn't planning on I didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew that scouts were looking at me and everything. So I had no idea what I was going to do if I didn't go to the NFL. I wasn't on pace to graduate on time or anything. And I just I threw myself into it full force my junior year. We got a new strength coach named Tom Howley my junior year. And that was the first time we had a full-time strength coach. So from the time of my junior season, because I think he came in with us right at the beginning of my junior season, spring of my junior year and then on into football, I trained the way a Division I athlete should train for the first time, with that kind of structure and that kind of supervision and coaching. And I really I zeroed in on that and made that my sole focus. So when I was talking to scouts and everything, I'd have to tell them that. I remember there was a Titan scout. This guy liked me too afterwards. There was a Titan scout who pulled the old, he looked at me. He'd been watching film. He was up in the offices at the Cornell football at Sholkoff Hall. And I walked in and he looked me up and down. And he's like, I got to tell you, I don't know if you're tough enough. And I was like, we can throw down right here if you need to, man. And he was an old Southern guy, and he was like, ah. So I took that approach because even in my rookie year, I'm like, all right, I could tell from the way coaches were talking to me. They didn't know. There weren't a lot of guys from the Ivy League and the NFL. And I'm like, these guys are going to think I'm soft or I'm a nerd or whatever. So I got in fights like every other day in training camp. I'm not going to let these guys think I'm a punk. I'm going to be the biggest meathead they've ever seen. And that was all she wrote. I retained that. I've just tried to be as meatheadish as possible ever since.
That's awesome. And it's a shame that it comes to that, and like that you're kind of like stereotyped, and now you're like forced to have this chip on your shoulder to prove like, no, I'm not soft just because I went to this school. Like kind of like you explained, like,
yeah,
like you didn't go there. It sounds like obviously you're smart enough to get in, but you went there because of football and not because of academics, and then happened to play football. So
yeah, it was kind of a perfect storm. I'll tell you another story. I haven't told this one in a while. My senior year of high school, we weren't a good football team. I think we won 2 games, and the coach got fired at the end of the season. And one day, Sean O'Day and I, this other lineman, we were in the weight room working out on our own, and senior year of high school. And we go into the coach's old office, and there's a stack of questionnaires from colleges on there asking about prospects. So Sean and I are like looked around, and we just started filling out questionnaires because we didn't have a football coach at the time. And one of them was I sent it to Cornell. The rest of it was like a lot of local Division III schools and everything. And so I didn't really think much about it. We were kind of laughing about it. We sent them off. 2 weeks later, I get called down to the guidance counselor. And he's like, "Hey Seth, there's a football coach here to see you." And I was like, "Oh." And it was Coach DeStefano. He'd end up becoming my defensive line coach at Cornell. And he's like, "Hey, come here, sit down, watch some of this film with me." And he's watching it. And I was, my high school film was really, really good. And he's like, "So no other schools to talk to yet, huh?" And I'm like, "Well, like Hobart and St. John Fisher and a couple of these Division III schools around here have University of Rochester." And he's like, "Oh, how'd you feel about coming on a visit next weekend?" So it ended and that was winter or spring of my senior year in high school. So I went and took my visit there. It's a different timetable for, non-FCS type schools or FBS schools. And that was pretty much it. Like I wanted to play football. I just didn't know, but that coach who had gotten fired had basically given me the advice not to aim too high at one point. And so I didn't like the idea that somehow I could go play at a Division I school or anything. I hadn't even considered it. So that part of it, like I didn't forge anybody's signature, but I was fraudulently writing a letter of recommendation to myself. It worked out.
That's funny. I mean, so like that basically led to your career, and you could say led to where you are now.
Yeah.
It's just cool how things work out, and that's really like mature of you too, mentioning that, most people would have an ego and think they're better than what they are and force themselves into a situation to where they're trying to get into a bigger program. And it probably was the perfect fit for you to be a bigger fish in a small pond, as opposed to the other way around. You may have never been looked at. And just from my, observations too, like I know a lot of NFL teams, everyone knows about the big blue chippers from the big schools. Like I feel like finding those diamonds in the rough is like the real thing. And that's what it sounds like you are. Like very few people ever come out of Ivy League schools and or FCS or lower. And so it sounds like you were a diamond in the rough. And then you also mentioned too, like you were kind of a late bloomer because you were at a FCS or a Ivy League school with not a great support staff. You didn't really get fully trained until later. So was that part of the process as well?
That was, it all worked out perfectly because I was 6'2" my senior year in high school. I ended up growing 2 inches, but from the end of my senior season until my sophomore year in college, I'd grown a couple inches. So I showed up at my freshman year like 235 pounds. I was probably 6'3" or so, but like much more lean than I am right now. But I just kept growing. And yeah, if I tried to walk on at a Division I school, I don't know if it would have gone as well for me. The other big part of having a chip on my shoulder was just all those coaches were also looking at me as all the NFL coaches and scouts. It seemed like every single one asked if I wanted to play offensive line. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I always hated the offensive line. I didn't like playing it in high school. I didn't want to play it in college. But if I'd gone to another school, they probably would have had me play offensive line at some point, because it wasn't like I was a great athlete or anything. So the chip on the shoulder, part of it was that, but part of it was just like I'm just naturally more wired to be a defensive player. Like there's if you're the guys who are play defense in the NFL who don't have great physical traits tend to be a little psycho, and like that was a little of the part of like the chip on the shoulder, but then also like, man, no, I'm just not wired to be an offensive player.
Yeah, and so it's crazy to me to like hear you talk about, obviously on the radio, and to get to know your personality, and just now too, like how you mentioned, people question your toughness, but as you alluded to, you were a tough SOB, and you've gotten who knows how many fights. So like it's pretty cool. Like normally people like that are like straight up meatheads, and you can tell, but like just talking to you, listening to your personality, you're jovial, you're funny, you're humble, you're down to earth, but you also like have this ability to where you can flip a switch and be nasty, so to speak, if you need to. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And when I mean, from just probably listen, like how long have you been listening to me on the radio?
Like, I mean, it's probably as long as you've been on. I turn on, and
so
I don't even listen to music. I listen to sports, man.
Yeah, like I used to flip out a lot. Like I had anger management issues, and part of it was that I've always been. It's not like I walk around every day being like I walked around being an angry person. Like in my personal life or anything, I wasn't. I didn't have issues like that. But part of it is, I know early in my radio career, a lot of people would accuse me of just having fake rants and stuff, and it was just all fake anger. I'm like, no, dude, that was. I can turn on the anger like that, and it's real and it's genuine. And problem with
probably passion, though, is probably a better word.
Yeah, right? Passion / anger. And that's how I always was with football, that I could turn it on when I needed to. But you do start to realize, especially when you get in arguments. Like I used to be in my personal life. Yeah, I didn't understand the difference between debating and discussing and just flat out shouting. And that was bad. Like that was it was never an issue with my wife or anything like that, but just in getting in debates or stuff, I would always take it a notch too far. But it was like because you start to learn over time that, anger, we do have anger for a reason. And the real root reason for it is that there's times in your life, especially when presented with physical danger, back in tribal times, that your anger protects you, that some boundary has been violated, and you got to get angry. You got to defend yourself. But when you start to use it in every situation, or in situations where it's not the right response, it's almost like a drug, or it's a crutch, and you don't realize, like, okay, you're not winning an argument. You're just beating somebody down by shouting at them, and people just stop arguing, and then they dislike you for it. So I went through a flip. It was right after Mike Meltzer called me unbearable 19 times in a row on our radio show one day. I was like, yeah, I kind of just sat down. I almost did like a profit and loss or a spreadsheet of it, and thought, you know what? Yeah, the amount, like, for whatever reason, I think that I need to be angry about things. I'm not. It's caused me way more harm in my life than it's helped me. And it really was kind of like flipping a switch like that. Like, I'm going to approach life differently, because I didn't realize that I always just had this MO that really wasn't helping me or anybody else out at all. And it became a lot easier. And I did a lot of reading and everything after that to kind of follow up and keep at it. But I feel like I have a much more peaceful and happy life now, once I've realized how many times, like, that. Yeah, if I'm being chased by a group of people who want to beat me up or something, yeah, that's a good time to get angry. But other than that, it's usually out of place.
Well, that's got to be a tough dilemma, and I'm sure it's a common one. I mean, you were a professional football player and were successful because of this, and that's how you resolved issues or whatever, by using your anger.
Yeah.
And you're playing a sport with like the biggest alphas in the world, so to you, like, this is the normal way to handle things. And then now all of a sudden you get thrust into the public life and into media untrained. And so you kind of just figure it out yourself. Like, I guarantee you, your story of just that has happened thousands of times over with other colleagues who are now in sports media. I mean, would you think that's the case too?
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that, like you said, with no training or anything, I'm kind of like, I'd listen to sports radio and I kind of saw you see what people do on TV, especially on the debate shows and everything, and you just think, oh, okay, I guess that's the way you're supposed to be. I can do that. What you don't realize is that usually when Stephen A. and somebody else are shouting at each other, it's it's
almost acting.
It's kind of performative. Yeah. And like where I actually feel it. So like I can't, I'm a method actor, man. So I just can't do it. It's grueling. It was like physically, that's why when people would say that I just was faking the anger or something, I'd be like, no, man, this is physically grueling and taxing. And that was another thing. It's just like, there's a different way to do this. I know there is. And it's helped too that I think because of podcasts and because of streaming and things like the way they go about it on Barstool and everything, that you just realize people's tastes have changed, and it is a lot more about being conversational now than giving hot takes and all of that nonsense.
Absolutely. And that's what this here is. Like, when I first started doing interviews, I got to have this question, that question. And I was like, you know what? I mean, mostly because I'm lazy, I quit preparing. But now it's like just a genuine, natural, authentic conversation. Like, I always stress out, like, oh, I'm not going to know what to talk about. And the conversation starts. I was like, I have a million questions right off the bat just talking to you.
Yeah, so. No, you're in the same boat I've been in. And it's, I was telling Sean this morning because we were watching the St. Brown podcast with Jalen Noel. And when you watch the whole interview, I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of I've seen professionally trained people, I've seen athlete podcasts, and if you were a broadcast journalism graduate and you're watching that interview, you'd be thinking, oh boy, they're not doing a good job keeping this moving along, or oh, there's just too much dead air there, dead time, and you don't realize no, the fact that they're not professionally trained interviewers is why they get such good stuff out of the athletes when they have them on, because they're just having a conversation. And obviously there's a comfort level when an athlete is speaking to another athlete. And then especially because of social media, because all you really, that little 90-second snippet that's awesome. It doesn't matter if 19 minutes of it is a bad interview. It's like, that's the stuff that ends up mattering or getting engagement.
It sounds like the key word that we're both saying is like authenticity, like authentic. Yeah. Like it's real, it's genuine. It's not like the Stephen A. stuff where it's like, I'm on this side, you're on this side, let's fight, and then we'll shake hands after. Like, no, I'm going to argue the point that I actually believe in. So when I tell you my answer, like, it's real,
Yeah. No, and it is, it's one of the things I like about Caserio when he talks about contract negotiation, both with other teams or with players, is that, one of the things I was doing while I was between football and media was commercial real estate. And what you learn in commercial real estate is that, there's not one side trying to screw the other side over or lowball the other side. Usually when it's done by two professionals who like each other or respect each other, it's all about finding like, okay, what do you need? Like, what works for you? And okay, this is what I need. And then through various different methods in real estate, it's the creative financing and different ways you can kind of structure the deal where you find a way where it works for both sides. And likewise in conversation, I mean, there is something to be said for when people turn on the radio and they hear two people shouting at each other, they might say they don't like it, but they keep listening. But I just I don't have the appetite for it anymore. I just don't. I can't do it. It's just not. I don't find it productive.
Yeah, like we don't as society, and I guess we're all different, but we don't require angst and real anger to be engaged. Like it can be like this, and your example, like you were talking about Caserio relating it to commercial real estate, which I thought is awesome. And I've heard him say on your show several times is when they do these trades, which he does often, he's not trying to win one over. He's trying to do something that makes sense for both parties, so both teams win.
Yeah, because you want to do business with them again in the future. That's
yes. You don't want to be looked at like, oh, this guy screwed me over. Like screw him. Like nah. Like
right. If Caserio was in the business of trying to embarrass other GMs, he would never be able to pull off all these trades that he does, It
would work 1 year and then you cash out, right? I mean,
it was one of the trades in, it's easy to bang on draft day for all the horrendous parts of that movie. But there was one of the negotiations that was going on that rang true, which is, when one GM says to the other, like, come on, you got to give me something or I'm going to, look like a jackass here. You got to at least sweeten the pot a little for me. I think that that type of scenario, it's understandable. It does make sense that GMs you don't want to embarrass the other guy. You just just like you don't win an argument. You might win a negotiation, like quote unquote, win a negotiation and rake the other guy over the coals, but then that guy's not going to want to do business with you. So I think they're really careful on managing that side of it.
And it sounds like not, excuse me, all GMs get that either, and that's maybe why they don't stick around. And I mean, if that wasn't what Casario was doing, then he wouldn't have this crazy volume of trades. Like, the track record and the history speaks for itself. Like, if he's making all these trades with all these teams, then people enjoy doing business with him and trust him. So
Yeah,
I'm glad about that.
yeah. No, that's I mean, like the Deshaun Watson one. Like, there's no way to. I don't know how he manages that when he talks to.
But that's their fault, though,
Andrew
right? Like
Berry and everything.
they thought
Right.
they had a good deal. That's on them. Like
No, exactly. He created an auction-like environment, and there was a price of entry, and they approved it. That was still. I'm guessing it should be taught in negotiation classes or whatever, because of the power of creating an auction-like environment. You had a starting quarterback with great upside at that time in history, and those guys don't hit the market ever. And in a limited pool of 4 or 5 teams, they were able to create this environment where both Deshaun got paid, obviously, but the Texans just got a boatload of picks that I think if you tried to go through traditional methods, it might not have worked out the same way. So just kind of creating that auction-like environment that applies to so many things in life, because it's true. We get competitive. We want that. We want what we want. We get a little irrational, and there you go.
Well, that's just, I guess, capitalism, right? Like you allow them to compete, have more supply, and the market's the market, and y'all duke it out, and y'all set the bar, and I'll deal with the best and highest offer. I mean, it's like commercial real estate too, in a sense.
That's what I thought. I wish. I think it was Dan Hansis that I first heard recommend this, that there just be some kind of app that all the GMs have that you can use where it's almost like you can bid on any player or any trade at any time, just to create as efficient a market as possible. And it would be really cool, except that somebody would leak all. The problem is it would end up being like Signal. Like somebody would get a hold of it and it would leak to the media. But otherwise, like for operating, I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, that would make them run much more efficiently. And just like, the way I am, if like in business, like dealing with people, like I'm all about cutting the BS out, the fluff out. Like, let's just get down to brass and figure this out, like, and not waste each other's time. So I'm sure the GMs would love that too. But I've enjoyed this. It's already been almost 30 minutes. I got you for an hour, and we're just talking about you and your background and your personality. But I'm sure fans, they've said they've enjoyed it, but I'm sure they want to know football. So first, we'll just kind of start with you on the Texans, just a little bit more detail on that, and then later we can go into the current Texans. You mentioned you went to an inaugural team. You got drafted in the expansion draft as a veteran. What is that like? I mean, because you were on the first year, 2002. So, like, do you have like a major sense of pride and like helping build the foundation for where we are now?
To a degree. I was thinking about this the other day. The problem is we didn't really become a genuinely bona fide NFL team until 2011. I felt like that was the first time where you felt like, oh, okay, this is a team that actually can threaten people. And the first 5 years, with Andre Johnson specifically, Andre comes out of this program that was one of the best in college football history, one of the best teams in college football history. And he came into a situation where it was just not that. Whatever the University of Miami was back then, it wasn't that. And I almost felt like as a veteran player on that team, without criticizing anybody else, because inaugural, like, expansion teams are hard. The Jaguars and the Panthers had a lot of extra draft picks and a lot of things given to them that made it easier to compete immediately. It's just really, really hard, especially if you don't have the right quarterback, for an expansion team to do much. And it was just hard to, like, I felt partly responsible for not getting the team to where I felt like it should be. And with guys like Andre, I always just felt like, man, he should be having a better experience in this. So I do feel like I feel a sense of pride, and it was cool being a part of all of that. I guess just personally, I always felt kind of a responsibility that I didn't it was an unfulfilled obligation that I wasn't part of. Really, the first 2 years we were making progress. The first 3 years we were making progress. And then all of a sudden, year 4, everything just fell apart. So if we had built on, we were just rubbing up against being a 500 or winning football team in those first few years. And then the 4th year, you're 2-14. And I felt personally responsible for Dom Capers getting fired. I love Dom Capers. He's one of my favorite football coaches ever. And I remember that year we went 2-14 of just feeling like, man, I just feel like I let people down. And I knew it wasn't like my fault solely or anything, but you're just always wondering like, what more could I have done? How could I have been a part of getting us along faster? The guys that when Kubiak came in and once they got the right mix of players and Wade Phillips came in, that was when you felt like, oh, okay, they're like this team can do things. This is a real NFL team.
But so like, first off, that's like a very admirable and respectable answer. And, I think it's awesome for you to like feel like bad about it when obviously, it's out of your power. I'm sure you did the best you could. And you mentioned the extenuating circumstances of being a brand new franchise and limited capital, this and that. So like as a fan, that's awesome to hear that. I'm sure you and other fellow veterans had that sense of pride. And I hope, and I don't suspect you think this, that you feel you let people down. And I would say just from me as a fan, and like on behalf of the fan base, I'm sure most would agree that, even though it took a while to get to that, you mentioned 2011, like I think a lot more recognition and credit needs to be given to those early years. Like you mentioned, it's not easy to do a foundation. It takes a while to build. So I played college football at Stephen F. Austin. I was a receiver. I didn't play quite a lot. I wasn't nearly I think what I lacked, I was a good athlete. I lacked the toughness that you talked about, admittedly. Like I didn't have that, mean streak on me. But anyways, after SFA, I went to Incarnate Word and I joined them late. But funny timing on all this is they started their program when I got there. It was like the 2nd or 3rd year. So it's a similar situation where they started it and they weren't great, but now they're like having great success. And I helped create a foundation with them called the Forever First Foundation, which is basically what you and the Texans are. Like, I'm sure y'all have something, but like there needs to be something, and I'm sure they do it where like y'all are commemorized and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, they they do a lot of really cool thing with the legends or ambassadors or whichever word they're using to describe it. They do a lot of really cool, and Cal was a big part of that. That was one thing that was kind of Cal's pet project, I think. Well, Bob McNair was still running the team, and obviously Cal was involved in the operations, but Cal was the first one that I think really wanted to be sure that he involved everybody from 2002 onward. And that was like, he was very real and genuine in it. You can see Cal enjoys being around the former players and has always shown a lot of respect for it. So they're really cool in that regard. Yeah. I'm not like crying in my pillow every night about it. I just wish that it's so cool to be a winning NFL team. I always felt bad for the rookies. And I had a position coach one year who spent 1 year in the NFL. It was in 2005 when we were 2-14. And Mike London, he ended up being the coach at UVA for a long time. And I remember telling him a couple times, I was like, hey man, it's not usually like this. It's like, hey, I promise you, he ran back to college. Because it's different too when you're on a bad team and there's egos involved from some of the guys on the team and everything. It's not the same experience. So that was more of it. It was almost like I just felt like you feel like you're always. I had a great coach in Frank Gantz Sr., who was an ex-Naval Academy guy and awesome special teams coach. But it was cool because he could with credibility bring the military stories into it. Like it's not like a football coach saying this is just like war. It was this guy is an actual Navy veteran who flew jets for the Navy and everything. And he would always bring up he would bring in SEAL training videos and talk about the discipline. And the biggest thing was always don't let the other guys down. Don't let the other guys down. So that was kind of drilled into my head. And I loved him as a coach. So I kind of always tried to take that approach of like, all right, crap, I'm not letting the other guys down, am I? And when you're 2-14, you're like, I know I'm not I'm not fixing this problem. So that part of it is you feel like you let your teammates down a little bit. But it's, I'm cool with it. Don't worry about that.
But that's the way it should be. And like, despite the team not being good early on, it sounds like the culture was established the right way. I mean, that sounds like kind of what D'Amico's doing. I mean, you mentioned military background. Bill Belichick has basically built dynasties kind of based off those fundamentals and principles. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess like, I just want to make sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no! I think D'Amico's done a really good job of getting guys to care about each other. I think that's CJ's whole mode of leadership, right? Is just letting guys know that you care about them, and as much as you can, form bonds that you'll do way more. You'll do way more. You'll sacrifice way more to help your buddy than often you would for yourself, and that's where I think D'Amico is. It's impossible to measure, but I think he understands and can identify those types of guys, like guys who genuinely care about their teammates.
And just getting like in the NFL, like my take on the NFL is like everyone is freaking good. Like
Yeah.
everyone is good. The third, fourth, fifth string guy, like the guys that don't make the league are damn good. So like to me, it's like more often than not, like the talent's almost equal. Like I think, like what you mentioned, like the chemistry and the coaching to me is the X factor. So if you have a coach that can get 1% more out of each player, that's probably a massive win. But I think this is a good topic to transition to now is D'Amico Ryans. I was one of the people when he was hired, I wanted the offensive coach because I didn't want to have to replace the OC so much, and they would tend to be younger and more innovative. And I didn't want like a meathead defensive coach. But a lot of the qualities that were preached to us about D'Amico was the intangibles, the leadership, the culture, all that stuff. And I kind of thought that was overweighed. But then now, like going into year 3, like I think it's undervalued. Like I think there's like the swarm culture. I know is cheesy and corny, and we always talk about it, but like I think it's unbelievable. What are your thoughts on that and the culture just overall and how it's going on with D'Amico and the Texans?
Yeah, the biggest thing about D'Amico, and I tried to explain this to people, and I'm glad that people can see it because it's so obvious when D'Amico is around, and you can see his effect on people, especially on the defense, especially so far, is that first and foremost, when you hire a head coach, you want to be sure you're hiring a good head coach. And if it was a tiebreaker, that if you look at a guy like D'Amico and then somebody else that you feel really good about, and one's an offensive minded guy and one's a defensive minded guy, then by all means it makes sense to go with the offensive minded guy for all the reasons that we know. It's nice to have that continuity, but yeah, I mean, you just see this so much now. You see these guys that get elevated to head coach because they're brilliant offensive coordinators and they don't have head coach traits. And you don't have to be, it doesn't mean you have to be the movie version of a head coach, but you got to be able to convince a group of guys that of your vision, and then hold them to a standard and go out and all be pulling in the same direction. And that's a lot of stuff that, coordinators don't have to do when they've got somebody else at the top that's already kind of setting that path for them. So you just don't know until they get there. So with D'Amico, when you try to explain some of those softer things, like the personality side of things, or the ability to motivate or just coach on an interpersonal level, it's almost impossible to say it and expect people to really believe what you're saying, because you hear it all the time when it's not true. Like every coach has motivational posters up on the wall. Every coach will talk about football character. Every coach will talk about all these things, and it just becomes white noise after a while. So it's just one of those things, like, it when you see it. And I could only say from personal experience being around D'Amico, and I was around him for a limited amount of time. My last year in the NFL, and I ended up getting injured, was his rookie year, that it just jumps out at you. And it's just hard to explain because it's such a unique thing that a lot of people, I don't know how many people I've met in my life that are quite like D'Amico Ryans. So who do I compare him to? Like, who do I say, like, oh no, he's like this or he's like that? I don't know. He's D'Amico Ryans. He's just different.
Yeah, and so like I've been using this analogy a couple times when I'm talking about coaching, and my specific example has been like OC, and it's been Slowick with Stroud as opposed to Cayley and Stroud, and it can be done for head coaching too, and it may be corny, but maybe you agree or don't agree, but it's almost like raising a dog. You got a couple options. You can have some people tell you got to be the alpha and dominate them, and once you make them submit, they'll do what you want. And I feel like that's like the old school way of coaching, and a lot of people have done it, and it had worked in the past. But now with the way the NFL is, these are grown-ass men. They're alphas. They're making 10, 20x the amount of money you're making. To me, that doesn't really fly, just from my opinion. So I think the correct approach is the equal approach, which is what I took in raising my dog, and we have a great relationship. Shout out Ranger, my Rhodesian Ridgeback. But it's to where, like, I'm going to get you to do what I want you to do out of respect, by showing you respect and love and care. And that seems to be what D'Amico does. He talks about that a lot. Like, he talks about getting to know players, getting to know their why. And he doesn't seem like that hard-o coach, but he still does appear on the outside. I don't know. It's a speculation that he can flip that switch and yell. But when he does have to do that, I guarantee, like, the players understand where it's coming from. It's not from, like, I'm a dominant, like, I'm doing this to help us. So is that kind of, do you agree with that at all? Or?
I 100%. I do think too, though, that I think there's always been, Bill Walsh was a different type of guy than your standard football coach. I think that with D'Amico, I think he does a really good job of figuring out how each individual is wired. And it would always frustrate me as a player when you've got a coach, because I played for Tom Coughlin, who's just one of the biggest hard asses this century. And I know he's soft.
And it worked, right? Yeah. But then it stopped working. And then
it works, right. Well, it worked finally when he kind of backed off a little bit with the Giants. Michael Strahan's old quote was, when I first started playing for him, he was the last coach in the world I wanted to play for. By the time I was done, he was the only coach I wanted to play for. And part of that was because Tom had told me that going into that last year before they won the Super Bowl, he and his wife Judy had talked about how, like, he knew he was on the hot seat, and they said, you know what, if this is going to be the last year, let's try to have as much fun and enjoy it as much as possible. And lo and behold, he just let go a little bit, and it worked. And I know there was some drama in that season where he had to back off even a little bit more. But the thing is, a player, what would always bother me is there's this dynamic sometimes where the entire team's getting screamed at, and it's two guys. Like, it's like we're sitting here getting screamed at because of two guys that are jackasses. And meanwhile, the only two guys that aren't listening are the two jackasses. So you waste a lot of time and energy trying to pretend you're a drill sergeant that you've seen in movies on not actually addressing the problem and not actually talking to the person that needs to be fixed. Not to say there's not there is a regimental side of football where, yelling orders and getting guys to do things quickly and everything matters. The biggest, again, the Frank Gantz, I cite him all the time. The one thing he used to say, because he was a hard ass in a lot of ways, but he would always remind people, and say, I'm attacking a problem. I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking a problem. You and I have the same problem, and we are attacking that problem as aggressively as possible. And you learn not to take things personal, because he's screaming. He's not screaming at you. He's screaming at the problem. And if you have that mindset of just remembering, even as a coach, that, like, all right, we're going to coach this aggressively, but I'm not beating this guy down. I'm just attacking a problem. And as long as the guy understands that the problem is, like, what we need to get done isn't getting done, it makes it a lot easier to take it. And because there's still guys, like Deion. Deion's a hard-ass, old-school type of coach in a lot of ways. But Kelvin Sampson, and Kelvin does a good job of getting guys in his program that will respond to his coaching. But that's him being aware of, hey, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So yeah. I'm not gonna try to force somebody who's gonna turn into a shell or a shell of a person with this approach. I'm gonna be sure I've got the kind of guys who respond to this type of coaching.
That's a great point. So, like, if you are potentially a rigid type of coaching or, hard to get along with, you make sure you get guys that, one, fit it, and two, let it be known up front. And then it sounds like you're saying too, like, a big part of it too is, like, just in coaching in general, is like communication and letting them know the perspective on things and understanding it. And so, yeah, like, this is what's tough too. Like, when we all, like, speculate on whether guys will be good head coaches or not, like, how the hell are we supposed to know? It's just like when we draft these guys, like, they really, from my perspective, I learn after the fact when I see these interviews of these guys that they really, really, really hone in on the swarm stuff in the draft. They may sway away a little bit in free agency, but, like, I feel like there's no guys, and it's maybe because, you have a longer term commitment and you're building the foundation of your franchise, but, like, every guy you watch, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, just like, man, this guy's a stand-up guy. You definitely seek that out for a reason. I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going there.
No, because we're talking about kind of creating your environment is, like, you want to be sure that the personalities mesh and everything. And like, the Ravens forever. And the Steelers, I think, have lost their way a little bit in this regard. But so I'll say the Ravens forever. You talk to scouts, and scouts will say, like, oh, yeah, that's a Ravens guy. Oh, yep, that's a Ravens guy. Like, they just know there's a certain type of guy that they do a good job of identifying and drafting. And I feel like the Texans are on that path. It feels like since Caserio and D'Amico got together, that they kind of got they've figured out, like, okay, is this a Texans type of guy? And we just got to be sure that sometimes the tiebreaker is, okay, these guys are graded as prospects the same, but this guy's just, he fits us. And it gets to the point, maybe ideally, it gets to the point where you don't even have to verbalize it. It's just like, you just know whether somebody's a fit or not.
And that's what they've said, Nick and D'Amico, is like they are on the same page. And now it's, teaching their, scouts and assistants. And like D'Amico has said, like, this process is getting more streamlined. Everyone's starting to see the same vision. So now it's like less teaching. And like you mentioned, like, hey, we know. And so I think the point that I was making was, did you have a point you want to get off before you forget?
Oh, no. We're good.
Yeah. So I was just saying, like, it's tough for us to evaluate how a head coach is going to be, similar to a draft pick. Like, we draft a player and we don't know because we don't know anything about or like we try to speculate who they're going to draft. Like, it's tough to tell. Like, if there was a way for us to like have a score or insight on their swarm abilities, then okay, yeah, we're going to get one of these 20 guys because they're the top character. Same thing with head coach. Like, we don't know how they are personally. Like, and it seems like more often than not, and I, got turned around to your line of thinking, like you said, like, we just automatically assume in society and extrapolate that this guy was a good OC, good genius play caller, he's going to be a great head coach. Like, no, like, Bobby Slowick is a prime example, was never a position coach. Now he's an OC. Now he has to lead a room of grown men. You don't know how he's going to do it. It turns out that he took the authoritative approach, which is odd enough because he's a smaller guy. Yeah. And it didn't freaking work. You know?
Well, you're right. And if you don't have the interpersonal side of, a lot of times hard-ass coaches are also funny as hell. Like, that helps a lot if you can kind of soften a little bit with humor. I think that with Slowick, part of it with him is, like you mentioned, he was never a position coach, I think. And there's certain things you just might not understand about how hard it is to teach certain things. And like, good in the NFL, especially, or in pro sports, the good coaches understand that things that look good on the whiteboard are sometimes a lot harder to execute in reality. And, Vic Fangio, I remember I think Vic's probably grown in that regard, but Vic will ask his players to do some pretty mentally demanding things in terms of, and it might not look demanding on the play sheet, but you can be put in a bind where, like, all right, I'm either going to be playing a deep third zone or I'm going to be manned up on the tight end, depending on like some little shift right before the snap. So there's decisions that have to be made where you're changing your whole defense based on, you're not tweaking it, you're changing everything based on one little movement. You got to be sure you have guys that can handle that, or that you're teaching it properly. And with D'Amico, I think the biggest thing is that, like, he understands that coaching is teaching. And there's a lot of times where, for him, he doesn't want his coaches yelling a lot and just down, beating guys down or anything, for multiple reasons. But one of the biggest things I've seen, because I've got a lot of coaches in my life and I spend a lot of time around high school coaches, is like, you got to always ask yourself, like, am I actually teaching or am I whining? Because if you're just screaming about how a guy didn't do something, then why are you not teaching him how he could do it? And like, you waste a lot of energy. Just screaming about results instead of fixing the process. If you're, like me earlier talking about getting angry, like, you're not actually addressing the situation if you're just flipping out and expecting a guy who's obviously lost and doesn't know how to do something.
Probably making it worse, having the inverse effect that you're trying to get.
Oh, yeah. You get so damn tense and you just like, because you don't know what the guy's actually asking you to do and he's screaming at you. So I'm just going to keep trying different stuff until it happens. And it's effective to a point. It can be very effective to a point, but like with Belichick wasn't a big yeller and a screamer. He was a really good, condescending and kind of dry.
Hey, don't suck.
Yeah. Like, he wasn't. Don't get me wrong. He was not a people person as a coach, but a lot of it, what they did really, really well was that they taught really well. Like, they coached the technique really, really well, and you'd see guys improve as the season went along on those Patriots teams, where it was just because I would watch the defensive linemen. They got better at their technique as the year went along. And then, you've got the hammer kind of behind you as you're teaching it that motivates them. But it's got to be some combination
A
of the two.
delicate balance. And that's like my buddy is the head coach on Incarnate Word. He's 32. And, I think he has several reasons why he's been successful. He's won a couple conference championships, but I think he manages that balance really well of being that authoritative, like get on you, but I'm also like your friend. And I'm going to he's like boys with all of them because he's younger, and being the player coach is part of that too. You can relate.
Yeah.
But yeah, Seth, so it's been 50 minutes already, and we've talked like 0 X's and O's.
Okay.
I got you for like 10 more minutes. I'm just going to try and just rapid fire through some actual football stuff and get your expertise on that. We'll have to have another show. I know we had a dialogue online about EJ Speed.
Yeah.
And, I didn't see it as an argument. I thought it was a discussion. And I think that we actually agreed. We were just kind of like talking on different angles on it.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me your thoughts on EJ Speed and kind of run through like the points you were making.
With EJ, like I'm very intrigued by him. I think that he's exactly like a lot of other guys on the Texans defense. He makes a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. He's really good against the run. The question has always just been, all right, how good is he in pass coverage? Just as it is with Azeez Al-Shaair, Henry To'oTo'o. I think both Azeez Al-Shaair and Henry To'oTo'o might have some physical limitations to where they're never going to be awesome in coverage. I feel like EJ Speed, who wasn't, didn't play a lot as an actual linebacker early in his NFL career. He was a special teams guy. Like, I think he's a unique guy who still at his age still has some upside if he's in the right scheme and he gets the right coaching. That's where I am with Christian Harris. Christian Harris made some awesome improvements, but he still has to learn some things when it comes to pass coverage. He's got a high upside just from the physical ability, I think, to develop into being good in pass coverage. So that's where I am with EJ Speed. It really, I think he's going to play this year. I think that and not just because of injury, it's that he gets out there and he makes plays. So what is his actual upside? Like, where can he go? He might be different in this scheme than he was in Indianapolis. And I could totally see him being one of the guys that, all right, boy, you know what? Things are working out really well for him. Blake Cashman was like that. Blake Cashman took a step forward while he was here, and his biggest issue was his injuries. But I like that would be I think it's realistic to say, like, all right, I think EJ Speed's going to do some good things for us. I have no idea how many snaps he's going to play, but I think if D'Amico can do his glow up thing with the linebackers there, you could really it could be a steal of a deal.
That's probably the biggest part of it too, right? The D'Amico Ryans guru-ness. I mean, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, guys that weren't highly drafted guys, Blake Cashman. So I think that's the play there. But yeah, so again, we're going to try and just get some, rapid fire football stuff. Obviously, you're a former defensive lineman. Let's just go on the D-line. Texans, obviously, edge duo. Talk about how awesome that is, how stacked the depth is. Obviously, Daniil, Will, Darrell Taylor, Derek Barnett, Danico Autry, now Solomon Bird's being mentioned as a standout. Let's start with the edge group real quick.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Solomon Byrd because he's another one that was doesn't have the awesome physical measurables, but he was really polished. I think he spent 6 years in college, didn't he? He was one of these 6-year guys.
Mature,
married with kids and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But he was real polished. Like, you could see he was doing everything. He was using everything he had. Like, he was doing what he could with everything he had, but had a level of polish to him that you can see where sometimes there's guys, the ultimate example is Brian Cox back in the day, who, ran a 5'1" 40 or something absurd, but was a really good linebacker. There are guys like that. The biggest thing with Will, I was thinking about this. When you look at guys that are sack leaders, one of the big things that's different with Will is just the guys last year, Max Crosby and I think Trey Hendrickson, both had a substantial number more snaps, just total snaps than Will had. And some of that is injuries. Some of it is that the Texans rotate a lot. But as Will gets more snaps and hopefully stays healthy for an entire season, for 17 games, his ankle is an issue. That's really, it's one of the only things that's holding him back statistically right now. He made a lot of improvements in his technique the first year, and he's working on different stuff this year. On the radio show this morning, we played J.C. Latham, his old college teammate, talking about playing against him this year with the Titans and thinking like, oh, I know how to play against Will. And then all of a sudden he was like, oh, this ain't the old Will. Like, this is a completely different. He's polished. He's improved in a lot of ways. That's where I think this year for Will, even though he took a leap forward last year, I think he might be in line for a bigger leap this year because everything's getting natural for him.
Well, that's what they say, that the year 1 to year 2 jump and the year 2 to year 3 leap, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, and if anybody would maximize their potential, it's going to be him, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, I don't fear that he's ever going to stop working on getting more polished because he was raw. Like he was really raw as a pass rusher, just by pure pass rushing technique and everything. And there's a lot of guys like that that are impressive physically who just never really work at it, and they just stay guys that stick around in the league for a while, but they never really turn into what they could be. Yeah, I don't worry about that with Will at all.
And from your experience, like with Will and any of the defensive linemen too, like it sounds like early on in your career, like things are moving so fast. Obviously, the first year you spend your whole offseason training for the combine, which says nothing for you for the season. And then, if you have one off season, but like you kind of stick to your bread and butter. So just so you don't mess up, but then you only have one or two moves. And like now is like the time when you can really add to your bag, so to speak,
Yeah.
which I think Matt Burke, referenced that he tried some new move and it worked. Was that your experience? Like now, like the more settled you get, the more you can kind of add to your craft.
Yeah, it's like a major league pitcher that has two really good pitches, but over the course of several years, he just keeps adding them, and you might add a change up and mess around with it in spring training, but you're not going to lean on it forever. But I would use Lance McCullers as an example of that. But this, if Lance had been able to stay healthy, Lance really
Hunter Brown added a new pitch, and now he's like a Cy Young candidate.
Right,
That's
yeah.
an awesome analogy. I love that.
Yeah, and there is it because there's a lot of muscle memory, but you got to get it grooved into where you feel comfortable doing it in a game. One thing Will had mentioned last year, he was on with Landry and Lopez at the Super Bowl, and he I think Lopez had asked him about integrating a spin move into his game, and Will was like, I want to, but I'm nervous, or just however Will says things. You're like, yeah, I want to, but I'm so nervous. I don't know. And part of that is that I don't know if you ever saw this or saw defensive linemen getting coached. High school coaches hate the spin move because high school players are awful at knowing when to use it. Like they'll spin out of plays, they'll spin in place instead of spinning and gaining ground. So a lot of times guys are coached in high school. Like you're not allowed to spin. And a lot of college coaches will say it too. So I can totally
master
see
the basics first.
Yeah. Because there's an element to a spin move that it feels like you're turning your back to the action, and you've got to do it properly. You're turning your back and you're taking a huge step while you want to gain a lot of ground while your back is turned before you spin back around. And it's kind of like, it's the equivalent, like a quarterback is in play action from under center. He's got to turn his back to the defense and then turn back around. So for somebody like Will, I could see him just wanting to really, really, really drill it before he starts hitting it in games, before he tries. He's not going to go out there and be like, I'm going to pretend I'm Dwight Freeney today, just out of nowhere. He's going to want to drill it to feel comfortable with it.
These things take time. That's great to hear. We're approaching the hour. I feel terrible because I got a bunch of more questions I want to ask, but I'm gonna have to turn you loose here in a minute. But I guess we'll just finish on the defensive line, and so something I've noticed too, and I'll get your take on this. And I heard it in interviews is, a lot of people have felt underwhelmed for 2 years in a row now on the interior. Wanting us to get Christian Wilkins last year and not doing it, and then this year, I thought, oh, okay, we saw the Eagles in the Super Bowl, basically win the game with interior pressure from the defensive tackles. Okay, maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll go get, somebody in free agency, or maybe we'll draft somebody early on. But they basically ran it back and added Sheldon Rankins. But I learned from listening to interviews through minicamp and OTAs is there is value in running it back. Now, like I know Daniil might have mentioned this, like now it's another year of them knowing all of each other's moves. So like there is, just like on O-line, there's chemistry and synchronization. And so, like, if this guy's going to do a spin move in this situation and get into this lane, and he's going to do that, now, kind of, is that a important thing to note?
Oh, yeah, that is really big. I'm glad you brought that up. Because when I think Daniil had talked about it, and that, especially as a defensive tackle, like when you've got really good edge rushers outside of you, there's a part where you always got to have in the peripheral. So like say I'm a left defensive tackle, but I got a stud pass rusher out here. You think about, let's say if Will Anderson is out on the left and he wants to use that spin move that someday he'll spring out. And I know the move wasn't a spring move that people were talking about, a spin move that they're talking about in the spring stuff. But so if Will Anderson is the edge rusher, but he's going to spin to the inside, when you're a defensive tackle who's not a superstar all-pro type, you got to kind of in your peripheral, when you see that red jersey come inside, know that you got to get outside. There's kind of like, unless I beat my guy clean, I'm like, nope, that's the guy who butters our bread. I'm getting out there to replace. So when Anthony Richardson or somebody really athletic escapes the pocket, it's just got to be automatic like that. And then there's a feel for understanding when that's going to come. So like as a defensive tackle, you can just tell the situations and you know what Will likes to see. And you can almost kind of feel it more so than even see it, that, okay, the offensive tackle really like took an overset or set too deep. I can feel this gap between the guard and tackle. Will's coming inside. And you just hold your guy in place enough to give him space and then get back outside.
And I imagine that's just done through experience and reps and practice and practice and practice, and then maybe talking about it. But then now, like, sure enough, eventually you've done it so much, it's like the chemistry's there. So, like, it sounds like there's great value in that rather than just adding some big superstar, but now you're having to relearn. Like, there's value in running it back.
Yeah. And I think they tweaked some things last year too. Casario had alluded to this, that they changed some things, some things in the way they ran the defense last year as the season went along. And, he didn't expand on it or anything, but I think one of those was that they had the defensive tackles be a little less upfield and aggressive at times and played more thick down the middle of offensive linemen. That's what it looked like to me. Like there were more times where, okay, no, Foley Fatukasi is, yes, this defense is fun and we just want to get across the ball, but on this one, we're going to have you be a little bit more old school and just try to control the offensive guard for a minute. And you saw evidence that it was working. So yeah, that kind of stuff as they tweak to these guys' body types or their skill sets, I think it should be good this year.
Or even adjusting to your opponent. Like, I felt like against the Ravens, that's what happened. Like, we had that attack style, just go straight ahead. And I feel like they took advantage of our aggressiveness and now ran these whams and traps and let tackles come upfield. And now you had tackles and, tight ends coming and crack blocking them, and they were just gashing us. And I feel like it took them a while to adjust. So I guess that's part of it too, huh?
No, there's an Achilles heel in a defense like that. And it's the traps and whams and all that stuff. It does. So you're trying to, it's kind of like training a racehorse, like you're like, okay, I'm not going to teach a racehorse how to canter all of a sudden. There's like, so guys that just come hell bent for leather off the line, there's a few certain things and looks where it's just got to be muscle memory that triggers you, that like,
this is a wham or a trap play.
Yeah. Like some of it, sometimes it's obvious. Yeah. Like you're unblocked. The worst though is, so if you're a guy like me who wasn't a great athlete, a lot of times
stop it.
When you beat, I wasn't a pass rusher. So when you beat a guy clean, you're like, oh, screen, right? Like you can feel it. You're like, oh wait, I beat him way too easy. There was one play in my career that still haunts me to this day, where I had like the best pass rush I've ever had in my life, and I stopped. I was like, I clearly couldn't have beat him that fast. And the quarterback's standing right in front of me. I was like, I gotta go.
Like, wait, how did I just? Oh, it's got to be a screen.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Seth, man, I appreciate it. This has been great. I'll have to try and make it happen again. I mean, there's a lot to talk to you about. You're great for the Texans community. I appreciate all that you do, and I appreciate you and everyone that I've gotten to know in this world. Like, that's been the one thing that stood out to me is everyone is super approachable, humble, down to earth, and I appreciate you for that.
Oh, my pleasure, man. It was a blast. Thank you.
Anything you want to shout out before we sign off?
Sean, follow Sean Pendergast on X. Sean T. Pendergast, former 5-time Smack Off champion.
Love Sean. I'll have to meet him at Lizards again soon. I've been a couple times, and maybe we'll have a drink sometime and better get to know each other. So
and follow my YouTube is where I'm spending I'm trying to get in I've been trying real hard to get in the rhythm of doing like just with regularity some shows, because I really enjoy YouTube. I have a lot of fun on there. Basically, a lot of times I just take whatever we talked about on the radio and I'm like, oh, and I can add visual aids to this. So it's even I can build on. Sean's basically my producer. He just doesn't know it. I take whatever Sean has put together for the show, and then I'm like, oh, okay, and then I'll add some plays to illustrate what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, and I've been catching you, like, whenever I see a live for anybody, or even you especially, I hop in and interact, and it's very interactive. It's kind of like here, and that's like, part of the new wave, and it's very enjoyable. So keep it up. I encourage y'all to go in there. But that's all we got, guys. Appreciate you tuning in.